There we go. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to WEBCAST Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into the webcast, which is going to be fantastic today, I'd like to take a minute or two and just let you know what WEBCAST Friday is and who we are. My name is Chris Armstrong, and I am the Multimedia Manager here at Interworks. And Interworks is a people-focused technology consulting agency based in Stillwater, Oklahoma. We have offices all around the world, including Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Chicago, New York City, San Francisco, Christchurch, London, Germany, and the Netherlands. So we are here today at today's WEBCAST Friday. It's going to be about 30-ish minutes. And normally during these, we show off some of the more interesting work that we do. And our hope is that you find it informative and inspiring. We'll have a little time of Q&A at the end, so feel free to use the Q&A button in the meeting, and we'll get to those at the end. WEBCAST Fridays happen every other Friday, and you can find our future ones at our website, interworks.com/events. So I am ecstatic for today's webcast, not just because the presenter today is a great guy and a good friend, but also because he's presenting on one of our software tools that helps users literally save hours of their lives. Zion Spencer is the product manager for Power Tools for Tableau, and his job is to talk to end users and server admins, take that back to our development team, and make your professional lives better. Zion, how was that intro? You want to fill in the gaps that I missed about what you do?
Thanks, Chris. It's great to join. Thanks for inviting me to be part of the webcast today, and I hope to live up to that intro. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun walking through the tools today. So as Chris was saying, this particular tool set has been around for a little while, but it's constantly under development. We're adding new features all the time. And that being said, there's a whole lot of Tableau users out there in the wild that don't know about it. So it's great to be able to revisit some topics. Maybe you've seen a little bit of it already. Hopefully this webcast will give you an introduction to some more features that you weren't aware of. And we're going to try to cover some basic things, some exciting things, everything in between. But like Chris said, it should end up saving you lots of hours on your QA process. But yeah, I think we're ready to jump in. Chris, was there anything else you wanted to add?
We actually already have a question. We are recording this, and it will be up on our blog either by the end of the day today or at the very latest on Monday. So thank you for your question, and Zion, it's all yours, man.
Awesome. Yeah, and with the questions too, please do feel free to drop those in as we're going along. We'll make a point at the end to run through the questions all at one time. And really, since we're going to try to cover quite a bit today in the next 25 minutes here, we're going to kind of speed through, and then at the very end, we'll save some time for those questions you put in the chat there. All right, so here we go, Power Tools for Tableau. So the website, if you haven't checked it out already, powertoolsfortableau.com. Now when you're on here, this is the home screen you're going to see. We've got three main tools. So the two actually that we're going to cover today on the far left and far right of what you're looking at right now is Power Tools Desktop and Deployments. Now these are the two tools that we released initially back in 2014. So these have been out for a little more than 3 years. And then right there, front and center is our brand new tool, Power Tools Server. And for this webinar session, we're actually going to not focus on that, since my colleague Brad Fair shared on server performance last week. We're of course glad to cover that tool in any follow-up phone calls we have with anybody who's watching this. But today we're going to talk about a QA process that involves desktop and deployments. And really, when we started building these tools, that was one of the main use cases we had in mind. So I'm going to step forward into just a high-level description of Power Tools Desktop and Deployment, and why these two go hand in hand. So on the desktop side of things, we're looking at ways to monitor and improve workbook design. So these are things that every site admin wants to make sure is good to go before the workbooks move into a production environment on Tableau server. So first off, things like data source usage. That's absolutely critical, making sure you're using the right data sources for security, for making sure that the reports look correct in every single way. Also, best practices, making sure that the workbooks have been built in a way that they're optimized for the best performance, and they're consistently throughout the Tableau community, they would be recognized as something that is something you can be proud of. And then with the last one here, maintaining consistency. So we have a lot of clients, of course, that your brand is everything. You want to make sure that that look and feel, the formatting, all of that is consistent across the board. It maintains the high level of confidence that what the user is looking at is legit. And so this tool checks for that as well. So all those things can, of course, take a long time. When you start multiplying workbooks, when you're going from a few users to 10 to 20, and you start seeing users multiply across the board, it's really hard to do that manually on a regular basis. So what our tool does is it does the scans for you and does it en masse. So once you do those scans, you then are able to automatically pull those into our deployment tool. So with this deployment tool, it grabs the approved workbooks that as an admin or power user, you've said, these are good to go. The deployment tool knows that right away, and it automatically deploys those workbooks. So with the setup of a simple deployment plan, which you configure, and it takes about 5-10 minutes to configure once you're familiar with the tool. And then once that's set up, it actually just runs in the middle of the night. So all of this process, start to finish, with the actual movement of the workbooks is completely automated. So it's running through all those data source changes. So if you're moving to production, the likelihood is you're changing to a production data connection. You are also needing to likely change permissions and refresh extracts. These are all things it does automatically. And then on top of all that, it's going to give you the ability to archive deployments. So you're not just looking at version control for the specific reports, you're looking at that version control and archiving for your releases and all of your releases that happen on a very regular basis. So all this is what we're going to cover today. Now, on the desktop side of things, this is where we're going to start. So we're going to cover our 3 main tools that are involved in a QA process: data source auditing, best practice analyzer, and then style management. You'll notice on here, we do have some other features that are very worthy of checking out. I would recommend download the trial for Power Tools Desktop for free on our website at powertoolsfortableau.com. And you can check out all these features. These other tools here have some great use cases as well. But again, we're really focusing this webcast today on how do you maintain a QA process with these tools. So these are really focused on the QA system that you have in place. And then what happens is once we have things checked out with Power Tools Desktop, of course, your workbooks are moving through a cycle on a regular basis. So that approval process doesn't just happen one time. It happens with every release. So here is a basic diagram of your data lifecycle in any organization. You bring in data into Tableau server, and then of course it ends up, you end up creating these reports that go into a sandbox. And then from the sandbox, of course, you go into production, and then finally to some sort of end user experience on a web portal or something like that. So what we're focusing on right here is this process that happens over and over between sandbox and production. And Power Tools is going to save a ton of time as you're doing this on a regular basis. All right, I'll switch my screen now. Let me pull up the desktop application, and we're going to jump into data source audit first. So we selected the feature for data source audit from our home screen. And if I want to connect to Tableau server to get the workbooks that we want to scan for our approval, in our test environment, then it's really easy just to connect over here with this option. You can enter a new connection, or you can choose a saved connection. So let's say if I wanted to use one that's existing, it'll populate my URL and credentials. And then once I sign in, it brings back all the sites and projects for my user, of course. So many times a site admin will be connecting to find all of the different projects and sites that they're responsible for. I'm just going to choose a test site that I've got these workbooks in that I want to connect to. And let me give it a name here at the bottom. And then once we connect, it's finding any of those workbooks on Tableau server for our analysis here, for our approval process. So if I just want to run the scan on both of these workbooks, I've just got a couple test workbooks here, classroom analysis and student profile. We have a lot of educational institutions that use power tools for Tableau, especially this time of year as you're gearing up for the coming school year and you're making adjustments for the next year. Definitely recommend checking out some of our specific use cases that have been involved with some of the other educational institutions. So if you're listening to this and you're working at a university, let us know, because we can help make life easier, hopefully, for you. All right, so we'll hit next to run this audit. So what it's doing right now is scanning these workbooks. It's looking at all the underlying XML to find out where are my data sources being used. So the reason this is powerful is because any admin who's trying to monitor an approval process is wanting to find out, number one, are we using the right data sources? Number two, are they used efficiently? And there's, of course, other reasons why we'd want to be concerned about our data sources, from security perspectives and all sorts of other perspectives. But we're going to touch on the main ones here. So this first screen gives us all of the data sources we're using. They're listed out here on the left-hand side. And then also all of the columns and the types of those columns that are in use. So if I were to select this field type, I could look at all of my calculated fields here, and it lists all of them out. Now, if I wanted to spot check some of my calculated fields, I could easily do that. I could select any one of these, and it's going to tell me where all it's being used. So let me just find one here. I'll just select this calculation here. It's telling me it's being used in these 10 worksheets. So I could go in and I could edit the calculation if I needed to very, very easily, just by spot checking those specific worksheets. And then here it tells me the calculated fields as well. So it's helpful to start to pinpoint some of those things in case you need to make adjustments to the calculated fields before they go into production. But at a more bird's eye view, what happens a lot of times is admins will generate this export down at the bottom into, you can see here, I'm saving a Tableau packaged workbook to my desktop. And it's going to give an indication of what all data sources are being used, how they're being used. And a lot of times what will happen is the admin will save this out at each release. And so there's a record of the quality of data sources for each release that has taken place. So if I go up here to my recently saved files, looks like our audit workbook is ready to go. So I'm going to open this up and we'll get a look here at our data source usage. All right, so once my screen adjusts here, there we go. We've got an indicator right here at the top that says 27% of my columns are being used from the data sources in these workbooks. You can see I've got a total of 8 data sources, and out of those, 27% are being used. Now, typically, if that gets well below 50% like we are now, there's a chance that you can increase the efficiency there. So that's a flag automatically to say, hey, you may want to dig into these a little bit. So if I wanted to, I could go down and select a data source here and see, okay, where is that being used? This objective mastery data source is being used quite a bit. There's 56 columns, there's 2 dashboards, 18 worksheets. This actually shows me all of the columns that are in use, and I can see each calculation, including the formulas in those calculated fields. So if I switch to another data source here, number of referrals, I can see that that's actually not being used that much. So in the case of extracts on server, maybe if this isn't being used that much, maybe there's a chance that if I'm using another data source, maybe I can reduce the number of extracts to where the server performance is going to be a lot stronger. So there's a lot of possibilities that this can help you with to make better decisions regarding your data sources. And of course, we could spend a lot of time on this, but hopefully you can see it's just easy to navigate and get some quick answers on those so you can spot check. So for this example, we'll just pretend our data sources are good to go. And we're going to move on to our next check here for the approval process, which is our best practice analysis. So we selected the feature. Now these are our exact same workbooks that we just ran the data source audit test on. We'll go ahead and run this best practice analysis. And what it's doing is scanning for a whole bunch of rules that we built into the application. And these rules are centered around performance. So it's looking to see where can we increase the performance of these workbooks and where can they be built more according to the best practices in the Tableau community. So it's kind of like having a consultant or a Tableau Zen master sitting right over your shoulder and giving you helpful recommendations. So these are not things that really they're more on the recommendation side of things. But as you can see, we have 339 issues that were found. They're not necessarily 339 things to do, or else your workbook is horrible. We're not saying that. We're just saying if you want to go in and make things better, these are some ways to really target. So for instance, we have some critical issues here. We've categorized these by severity level. So you have some others down here at the bottom that are just warning. So maybe those aren't as important to you. You can actually configure these rules to where only the most important things show up for you. So in this case, it's highlighting in this particular workbook, we're using if case logic in one of our calculations in that workbook. So let's say I'm not as familiar with that topic. We actually link out to some articles on that particular topic, and our Power Tools, you're now looking at Power Tools for Tableau.com. So it gives you all these different articles on the best practice topics. So it's actually a great training tool. So you can forward these on to new users as you're checking and approving the workbooks. You can send this link as a helpful recommendation. But then back on our Power Tools desktop application here. So you can also export this out to Excel, and we make it easy to share this around as well. But all of this, again, so that you can go in, if you need to, make any changes before you actually approve the workbooks for production. All right, last one we're going to touch on here is style management. So as we said earlier, we're wanting to make sure that our styles are consistent. Our brand is looking stellar. So we'll select these workbooks in style management. Once again, same workbooks that we're running through our entire approval process. And this time around, what it's doing is it's scanning the XML again, but this time it's looking for all of your formatting across the board. So all of the places that you have different fonts and colors. And if I go, we have a few different tools here, but I'm going to focus in on text formatting. So right here off the bat, I have a list of all the fonts and the formatting that I'm using in these workbooks. So you can see here, there's quite a few different selections. Now I can actually narrow down to categories as well in this dropdown. So back here on the main list, you can see I'm mostly using Arial, but I've also got some Tableau Book and some other ones involved here. Let's say if I wanted to narrow down, well, what am I using in my titles, for instance? And am I consistent there? Well, actually, I'm not using any Arial fonts in my titles, and maybe that's something that needs to be addressed. So if I wanted to go ahead and make that change across the board, I'll select all categories again. And let me just select all those fonts. And then I'll say, I want to change everything to Arial. So we'll hit review and apply that change. And then I can actually just publish it right out to Tableau server. So it publishes right to that same test location. Once I sign in here using my credentials, I can choose, of course, the project to publish it to and make sure I publish it to the right test project. And it saves out the new version of those workbooks. So very, very easy to make that style adjustment to make sure everything's consistent. All right, so now that we've run through those 3 main quality checks that everybody's concerned about, everybody wants to have data sources, styles, and best practices all in good shape for their workbooks as they go into production. So let me pull up Tableau Server here, and we'll show you that I've got a test site here that I want to move these workbooks that we just did our approvals for in the Power Tools desktop tool. And if I select these, because I just ran the checks in our Power Tools desktop application, I can go ahead and just use the tagging feature in Tableau Server. And let's say I just want to tag these as approved for the deployment, because I want the deployment to automatically move those over in the middle of the night. So we'll just save the tags that those have been tagged as approved. Now, another thing we can do that is very common, and maybe for some people watching this, this could be a neat new feature for you that you haven't thought of before, maybe. So we're going to go ahead and open up this dashboard here just to show you. I have a dashboard that has a watermark image. So this watermark is telling us that we're using dev data. So in production, that would need to drop off, because we only need to warn the user when this workbook is being looked at actually in the test environment. So that watermark image, we can take that off in the deployment process. So to do that, it's very simple. I've actually got a deployment plan already built, just since we're short on time today. I've got one here that's going to move those workbooks into production, those ones that we just approved with our desktop tool. So I'm going to open up this deployment plan. We're going to touch on a few of the topics here that involve changes that you can make to your workbooks in the deployment. But first, what I want to do is just show you how easy it is. Once this is set up, how easy it is just to run a deployment, because I know some of you watching this are in the process of manually doing this on a daily basis. It's very time consuming, especially if you have a lot of data source changes as you're going into production. Data source transformations can take a long time. And so we help you avoid that with using this tool. So I'm going to hit the run button on this deployment. So those 2 workbooks are the ones that we approved. And let me select this output, because this is the log file that's generated every time we run a deployment. It keeps track of everything that we did. So of course, you can kick off this plan actually in the middle of the night. I just hit the run button myself manually just there, but we can easily set this up to where it just kicks off in the middle of the night, and then everything's ready to go the next morning. So as I scroll through this log file here, you can see things like we grabbed all the workbooks tagged as approved. In this case, both of those workbooks were approved because of our checks in our Power Tools desktop. And then as I scroll down, we have things like we enabled extract refreshes during the process. And then as it's going through the publishing, we're getting here close to the end. And so we're here on the final step now where it's publishing the workbooks. And then here in a second, it's going to let us know that the deployment is complete. There we go. So just like that, we saved ourselves from doing all of the manual steps. And then in the process, what we did, let me switch back over to our production site that we ended up deploying to. So this was the approved project that we deployed to. And we'll pull up that student profile workbook here. And after it loads, we're going to see that there's no watermark. So there we go, no watermark at the top right. And you'll also notice at the bottom, we removed the tag. So it did say approved. So when we moved over into production, we no longer needed that tag. So that's gone. We also needed to switch the data source into a production data source. We changed that. We had several different edits to this workbook as we kicked off that deployment. And when it went through the process, it took care of all that for us. So back on the tool, just to give you a few sites here of what we actually did to set this up and show you how easy it is. You simply check off your source Tableau server and your destination by saying which save connection you want to include in your migration here. So it can be any point A to point B on Tableau server. And then you tell it which project, you tell it which workbooks. So in our case, we tagged workbooks as approved for production. You could also make specific selections of workbooks if you wanted to. We told it to take all these workbooks into our approved projects with our mapping feature. We removed that watermark image by simply going in and specifying that the devdata.png was the file that needed to be removed. We went in and we changed the data source connection from our dev SQL connection to our prod SQL connection. Now, of course, if you have others connections besides SQL, you can set up multiple transformations for all the different Oracle and all the different data source connections that you have available in Tableau server. And then also permissions and tags. We removed the tag for approved. And then finally, down in options, this is where we set to refresh your extracts in the deployment. So there's a number of other things that we could touch on. Hopefully we'll get the chance to cover them later. So after this webcast, we hope that you'll reach out to us on powertoolsfortableau.com. Please go there, fill out a form, let us know you saw the webcast and any questions that you had. And we'd love to set up a personal demo time and even set up trials of these tools. With the deployment tool that we just covered, you do have the option to do a free trial, just like desktop. You won't be able to find that on the website just because we'll send you a key for that as long as you request that from us. We like to be a little more involved in the trial process of the deployment tools. So that's why we don't have it on the website. But just let us know you want to trial that in any of our tools and we'll get you set up. All right, it looks like we have a question here in the Q&A. So we have somebody saying they have 900 embedded and published data sources and are in the progress of moving the source servers. The new source servers have a new FQDN that can I show you how to do that with the deployment tool? So the answer is yes, I can show you how to do that. Would be glad to. I think probably to set up the specifics of that example, it'd take more than a few minutes. So let's talk after this webcast and can definitely walk you through. So one of the sections we didn't cover was the published data sources. So we can definitely touch on that in a follow-up call. We have another one here that says, do SSO logon work with both tools? So we do have the ability for Active Directory logins. With SAML, we do have some limitation on the SAML side of things. However, we can set up a workaround with you. It's not going to be exactly the way that I've walked through today, but we can show you how to set up that workaround. These are great questions. Anyone else here? We've got, looks like maybe another minute or two before we wrap up here. All right, it looks like we may be in good shape on the questions here. So since I just mentioned this, I'll go ahead and lastly here, just go back to our website and then point out for anybody who's watching this that does want to download a trial, powertoolsfortableau.com. If you go here to desktop, you'll see right here, we've got download free trial. So it's really easy just to populate these 5 fields here, and then you're off to the races. It'll download in a matter of seconds. And then once you click to install, you'll just enter your trial key. That'll come in an email, of course. And within a couple minutes, you're up and you can hopefully do the same things that I just walked through just now on your workbooks. So All right, Chris, I think we're covered. Do you have anything else on your end, Chris?
Awesome. Hey, that was a great presentation. Thanks so much, Zan, for joining us. And thank you guys for watching. If you guys are okay with it, I will turn your registrations over to Zan so he can get in touch with the couple of you that asked questions, just to make sure that your questions get answered and if you're interested in those. So again, thanks for watching. Zan, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll be back not next Friday, but the next Friday every other week with another webcast. So thanks again, and we will see you later.